call this development committee meeting to order. Stand for the pledge. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, you want to call roll?
Howe,
Here.
Walter,
Here.
Carter. Here.
All right. We'll go ahead and let you get moving on this.
All right, thank you, Mr. Powell. Anytime there's a proposed plan development district rezoning, there's two steps that happen before a formal application can be submitted. They first need to meet with staff, and then they have to go to Planning Commission as part of a public meeting. It's not a public hearing, there's no application fee, but they do that for feedback from Planning Commission on what's being proposed. Also in the code, there's a provision that says they can go and appear before council for feedback from council on this. So we've typically done that through development committee. So with that, I've included in your packets, there's a quick write-up with some of the site statistics and then a development plan. This is what was reviewed at Planning Commission, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Bob Long, who's, this is his project, and I'll let him take it from there.
Thank you.
Sir, for the record, can you go ahead and state your name and address, please?
Okay, it's Bob Long, L-O-N-G. It's 1066 Harrison Park Place, Columbus, 43201. Okay, so I represent Vision Development, and the owner of that is a person named Brett Reitzel. Unbeknownst to me, I showed up in the restroom and I met Skip Hoovler, who proceeded to sell Brett ground here 20 years ago, so which I didn't know, so that was kind of an interesting sidelight. So anyway, so Brett's in contract on these 60 acres. We're trying to get some informal feedback on a mixed-use plan. The plan you have would just be at this stage, that's not what the final plan is going to look like, but the thought was there will be some apartments, some single family, some condominiums. Should I speak louder?
Just checking to make sure it was working. Yes, it's working.
So again, the idea would be to try to understand from your perspective which uses that you're willing to consider. On the outer arc, because this ground is going to require an arc road that would go from basically where right now the entrance is in AEP. So it would go from there all the way down to creating an arc, go back onto Broad Street. And so what we're looking at is trying to, because it's a large site, it's almost 60 acres, what are the types of uses that would make sense on the site? And the outside of the arc, and again, the arc road would be a public road built to public standards. And what we were showing in that plan was one area having the single family, next to that a smaller piece that would have condominiums, and then next to that would be apartments that would be out onto Nick. Within the inside then some commercial, something on the corner that would be more of a whatever you might see in a heavily trafficked corner, whether it be like a Kroger, Fresh Eats, something like that. Also looking at potential for some office space, and then some senior housing that could be, basically a lot of people are looking at independent assisted living and nursing. So we don't really know how this is going to shake out at this point, but it is in zoning. We want to get it rezoned, and we need to kind of determine what uses might be, the community be willing to look at. Now, having said that, Brent is an apartment developer, so he would be interested in doing apartments. He has a number of really, really nice apartment projects that he's done around town. You know, we are not a single-family home builder, so we would work with one of the, you know, prominent single-family home builders. But again, it would be setting this up with Brett to kick it off with that, and we probably, again, would probably work with one of the home builders to look at the needs for single-family and condominiums.
So I guess I'll just open it up to the committee to have any feedback or form. No, or anything?
Scott, how does this compare to our draft comprehensive plan? What's the use on the draft comprehensive plan compared to this proposed use
At this time, I think it's industrial in nature.
on the draft?
Correct.
Okay. And then I guess
Go ahead.
the apartments that your company has developed, height-wise, what are you 2-story, 3-story apartments? What do you think this product is?
Well, probably 3-story.
3-story.
I think what everybody's kind of coming to the realization, and I know everybody, it's always a challenge to figure out whether communities want apartments or don't want apartments. You know, I've also done a number of single-family development, land development issues, and it's extremely difficult to get single-family lots, and the process is very long. And I think with the growth that Columbus is gonna have, and in turn Pascagoula, I mean, apartments are becoming more and more a way of life for a lot of people. And what they're looking at is, you know, more higher-end apartments, and looking at their, probably staying there longer than they typically would in our generation, where, you know, you might in fact, you know, apartment would be a short stepping stone into a single-family home. But for the millennials, the difficulty of, you know, paying off student debt and getting into a single-family home, they're getting married later. So these are good ways for one to do a high-quality project that then becomes a feeder for the single-family and people that stay in the community versus going outside the community, going somewhere else.
You said that, he has developed apartments in your local area that we could reference, or that you could give us an idea of what they look like?
Well, he's done a lot of different types of apartments. You know, most recently, he's doing a project that's out on 270 in Davidson Road, which is City of Columbus. He's got another one that he did on Linworth, that's actually in the Wilmington School District. He's got another one up on Route 23 called Murata. That one and another one are the taller buildings. Typically, they're 4 stories. He's typically, you know, looks at a strong amenitized package because that's what people are looking for. But we've not done anything in Pataska or.
When you say, high quality or high end, how do you define that?
Well, I mean, I guess you kind of look at the price point. You know, so, you know, the average price point's probably gonna be over $1,000 per unit. There's becoming more and more a mixture of people that, you know, want to live on their own. I mean, it used to be, you had a lot of people that were basically got 2 or 3 people together and they live. Now, you know, the majority of people, if you look at that's what's being built today, you have more and more 1-bedroom apartments and studios than you do, you know, 2 and 3 bedrooms. So it's gonna be going after that target market of what people are looking for in apartments today. They're looking for workout facilities, they're looking for a pool. It's a place that they wanna feel good about because they feel like they're gonna be there for a much longer time period than typically in the past of what's happened.
I have a question. This would be more for Scott, just for comparison's sake. The single-family residential, 62 lots. Are there any neighborhoods right now that are comparable in size, or is that is that quite a bit smaller than,
Off the top of my head, I'd say that's similar, the minimum lot width to Broadmoor Commons.
okay.
I mean, coming from the land development side, one of the challenges right now is all of the homeowners want just-in-time inventory. So they'd like the ability to do 200 units, but they only wanna commit to, you know, a third of that. And it typically comes into, what can I build within 3 years? You know, during the downturn, they all got kind of hit hard by Wall Street. And so having ground on their balance sheet is a huge negative. So I know you were looking at, you know, some lots for Ryan Home. But the challenge for everybody is who's willing to make a longer term commitment. And they all wanna be able to, in a downturn, not have, ground sitting on their balance sheet that's not productive, and it actually creates a lot of problems for them. So you got the Dominion days and all of that, MI, they basically kind of put all the land developers out of business. And now you're starting to see more and more people that are jumping in to do that, but it's a very highly risky, you know, so to us, 62 made sense. Not that it couldn't be 70 or 80, but it's a size that we know that the homeowners will make a commitment on and make a firm commitment on.
Good.
Well, and I was just going to say, it's a challenge in the area because we don't have a largely a diverse housing market for demand. So, you know, we have a couple of specific things that are offered. On the flip side of that, we also have tremendous growth pushing in, which puts a lot of pressures on our school systems. And so when you start talking multifamily units and things like that, it starts to make locals a little nervous about the additional pressure on the schools, because, you know, they have to go back to the public for levies and such to continue to build and try to facilitate that. So that's where, you know, if we were talking something like this, in order for me to be able to say to my own constituents that this would be a good deal, I would have to know that, you know, that there's a long-term commitment, the quality of it, you know, and that sort of thing. But it does, I know at least me, it makes everybody cringe a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I mean, everybody's going through growth. I think the best way you hedge that is with the type of units you're building. You know, because if you got kids in the school system, more than likely you want a 3-bedroom. So the decision from our end was that's gonna create issues. Maybe we don't do 3 bedrooms. But if 2/3 of your units are, you know, basically 1-bedroom units, that's really not very conducive, or studios, it's not very conducive for people that are gonna have kids in the school system. So that, we would more heavily weight. It tends to be, you know, more of a millennial people that haven't gotten married yet. You know, the next step would be to probably buy a home once they get married.
So what would be the next step for the applicant?
The next step would be if Mr. Long chooses to pursue this, he would need to submit a preliminary plan application. That would then go to the planning commission, and since it's a rezoning, it would end up before council to approve ultimately the rezoning. Should that be approved, then it's back to planning commission for a final plan, and then we go through the platting and construction process.
I have a question. I'm with Bob on this. I was delayed because of traffic. But anyway, you asked a great question, Andy, and because applications are expensive and putting together plans are expensive, I want to ask probably just 2 major questions. If we could get some feedback. We know you have your draft comprehensive plan. You asked about that. How much weight is it going to hold now that it's not in effect yet? When do you expect it to be in effect? I know new plans come out and people say, oh gosh, it's for industrial, we're already violating it. I know, I can hear those arguments already. How are you going to deal with the draft comprehensive plan?
If you want,
Yeah,
currently,
Scott, why don't you go ahead and
yeah,
address
currently it's recommended for industrial in the existing comprehensive plan. So if we take the draft off the table, it still wouldn't be in harmony with the existing comprehensive plan
Yes.
based upon that.
Mhm.
So the draft, we can look forward to it to say this could happen, but since it's not an approved document at this point, it really arguably has no relevance. So we'd still have to rely on the existing comprehensive plan for its recommendations.
And given the way that the area's been developing, and you've got your Main Street intersection there, and there are other developments like Broadmoor Commons, those there, do you, can you tell me if you consider residential uses there, a positive type use?
I would defer to the development committee on that. This really has no bearing, I just kind of facilitate the process, but with this proposal, will come down to a council decision.
I'll answer that. Connie, obviously, residential has its place in certain areas. It's basically, how does it affect traffic? You know, this is a corner of a very busy street, so in my opinion, the commercial aspect of it is better than the residential, just being honest about it.
That's what
It's not necessarily detrimental to the plan. I think the smaller lots are probably more of my concern when you really look at it and say, more so than the apartment buildings. So maybe that gives you kind of an idea where I would think about it. Apartments would be better than small lots. You know, 1 bedrooms are better than 3 bedrooms, and commercial's better than all the above,
Okay.
in my opinion.
The question would be, when you say lot size for a single family, what do you think?
My personal opinion.
Right.
Well, it's so a few of these are at 50 footers. That's an awfully small lot in my opinion. I'd rather see 75, a mixture of 75s and 65s. That would be ideal for most communities. I don't know that that necessarily works here, depending on what the product is. You know, if it's a 55 and older, obviously a smaller lot size is better
Right.
for that consumer. So those are the aspects that would have to be, I think, weighted to really make a good decision.
I mean, our thought was when you look at the smaller lots, that's really it's a condominium, typically a single story, empty nester. So, you know, you have 40-foot wide building and 5 feet on each side. Single family lots, you know, I think you could probably work with 65. When you get to 75 with that location, you still have the railroad tracks behind it, gets harder, the price point.
I was just gonna mention that with the railroad tracks here, you might be thinking of other
But what,
things.
you know, I mean, typically when we come in, we try to do something that people feel good about. I mean, we're not interested in having huge battles, and trying to force something that doesn't work. We think what we have has a lot of good uses, and it could work well for the community, but, you know, we're not gonna come in and try to do 50-foot, single-family home lots.
Good. Yeah, that'd be probably a struggle, in my opinion.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, next is the review of proposed amendment, for the demolition code.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. In July of 17, we established regulations for demolitions, because prior to that, the code, you required a permit based upon the fee schedule, but there was nothing by which to say there was regulations to look at to do that. So when the code was established, or the regulations were established, it gave a 90-day, so you get a permit, it's valid for 90 days after the date of approval. There's a chapter 13 in the code that relates to the building code, that is rarely used because we don't have a building department, and we defer to Licking County. So it was this summer with the house on Columbia that was coming down, that was a mess. We started to delve into that section of the code and noticed there was an issue wherein one of the sections gives folks 60 days to complete it, which is contrary to the 90 days. Additionally, if there's the order to demolish the building, in the last section here is 13-1506, it gives them 90 days. So in order to clear up the confusion and make everything in line and uniform, the proposal would be to amend section 1315.03 from 60 to 90 days.
So this is just, really looking to harmonize the code, make sure that everything's, okay.
Correct, because if there was the order to remove it, then if we went under the one section, it would say you have 60 days, but then they come in and get their permit, and then it's like, well, now they have 90 days, and we're kinda in a gray zone, but it's like, we make everything 90, it's uniform, there's no confusion about what's required.
Okay.
Do you need a motion from the development committee to take that to council or for approval?
Typically, kind of what we've past practice is that development committee has a motion saying, please proceed with this. It will go to planning commission, and then following a recommendation from planning commission, in 30 days, it'll come to council for a public hearing.
One other quick question on the demo sections. If there, and I'm not overly familiar with them, but is there a way that if you feel that there's an emergency, there's a safety issue, there's a building that's gonna fall down on somebody, seems like a 60 or 90 day really isn't relevant at that point because you've gotta do it faster. Is that already in the code that allows you to expedite? I mean, I understand going to 90 days, that makes
Yeah.
sense, but it seems to me like the 60 days might have been in there to try to push people to go faster.
And I believe there's a provision in the code that with approval from council, they can have it removed immediately. But I will check to make sure there's something in there.
That would be my only comment, to go into the 90 day to make it consistent.
Yeah. Okay, so,
Do you want me to make a motion?
yeah,
Yeah, if there could be a motion.
I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve this change, once Scott's able to determine if there is a way to expedite under certain conditions, emergency conditions, safety issues.
Mhm.
I would second.
we have a motion and a second. Kathy?
Powell,
Yes.
Faulkner,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Alright, on to number 5, do you have anything else you wanna?
No, sir.
Okay. Andy?
I just have one quick question for just the committee in general, regarding the issue of the comprehensive plan. I didn't know if that's something that will come to this committee, if that's the desire, I guess, if that's gonna happen that way or not, just asking the question, if this committee should expect seeing that sometime here in the future.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to touch on too, just kind of figure out what how that's gonna work its way to council, if that's just gonna go through planning commission, if it's gonna come to us first, if anybody can weigh in on that.
Because my next thought would be that we get our feedback based upon public comment, and we sit down with the steering committee again and say, hey, here's what we heard, what do we think? And with that, OHM will not be involved in this portion. I will facilitate the steering committee meeting, we'll go through, make changes, OHM can update the draft as appropriate, give it back to us, and if we need to meet with the steering committee again, we can do that. And my thought is, once we move through the process with the steering committee and everybody on the steering committee is comfortable that they feel we like this plan, we want this to move forward, then it might be a stop with development committee, or my thought would be we do another public hearing. I'll facilitate this through the entire process. We do another public hearing, And we put the road signs up, we put it on Facebook, we put it on the website, we'll send postcards out again like we did with the survey. Make sure everybody is aware that here's the draft, we heard your comments, here's the draft based upon those comments, and we get feedback again. And then any tweaks we need to make, if we meet with steering committee again, we make those tweaks, and then maybe following a consensus with the steering committee that everybody's comfortable, we've had our public hearing, we can take it to development committee, before it then moves to council. So we can kind of make sure that through the process, we get everybody comfortable moving forward, and then when it's time for council, OHM will be here to present the final draft product to council, and then I will help with that presentation since I'm taking kind of on the last legs here of it.
Scott, I like that idea. I think that, it's important for us not to take the power away from the steering committee. Especially they've been facilitating this throughout and know all of the details and have sat through hours of talking about this plan. So after the last set of public comments in the hearing, I prefer that it go back to them and review and continue that vetting process before we were to start to step in there and mix opinions in. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I agree, and that's something I think we'd have to discuss when we figure out exactly what the course is, would be exactly what our role would be, and, if it would just be facilitating more public input or whatever the case may be, but that's a discussion we can definitely have down the road once that time gets closer.
And my thought would be maybe we get the steering committee, get all that through, our public hearing, they're comfortable, and then maybe we hold a development committee meeting with the folks from the steering committee. So then that way, if the development committee has questions, it's not just me saying, well, they thought this, that they can be here and be able to speak to the plan as residents, not me just facilitating this and speaking on their behalf.
One last question I had regarding it, Scott. One thing I noticed that, or one thing I didn't see in the draft was discussion about utilities and some of the school stuff and some of the roadway network stuff. I just noticed it wasn't in the draft, and I didn't know if that was still being worked on, and then that'll be brought into the draft sometime later.
It's still, there's certain things that I noticed that too, and it'll be a discussion with Alan, the engineers, like, is there anything that, here's what we have, do we wanna beef this up a little more and talk to the steering committee about
And
this?
maybe the district and some of the, the Southwest Licking Water and Sewer District, those kind of things. That was kind of one of the important things I think
Yes.
we identified to make sure was included in the plan.
Yes, and I sent an email to Mr. Conkle today to talk to him about some of the utility numbers and things like that from the district perspective. We just got those or some updated numbers from our utility department. So those are going in there, so it's evolving and getting, certain sections are getting beefed up as necessary.
So I would echo Mel's comments. I'm comfortable with what you just mentioned about the steering committee. I certainly hope that they can participate with us to move it forward.
Well, and if I can just add something, we, at our street committee meeting last week, talked to Alan a great deal about the intersections throughout town. And, I called them, we'll just call them, I said the intersections, he called it the asset management plan. It's something that, having the consultant come in who's third party, looking objectively at our intersections and giving us a real, idea of the most dangerous intersections, the ones that need to be addressed first based on, traffic, that kind of stuff. So I think if we had something like that, it would be helpful too for the steering committee as they're moving forward and looking at the bigger picture to know what intersections have been identified is needing improvement. So when you say work with Alan, I think that's really important that, that communication is given to the steering committee.
Alright, there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Carter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Walter,
Yes.
My
next is Ag Committee, so.